Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive, this time around, all about U.S. immigration. Well, a specific slice of it anyway, how the system is trying to bring in the best talent from, everywhere else in the world. We've got articles, policy changes, even some case studies to dig into. Should be interesting.
It's like trying to put together one of those 1,000-piece puzzles. Each bit of info we've got, whether it's about visas or what the courts are saying, it adds up to this picture of how America's trying to stay ahead in the race for the smartest people.
Right, like we've got Qatar joining that visa waiver program, which is great if you're a tourist, but does that even matter if we're talking about attracting people for work? Are those two things even related?
So the visa waiver thing, that's mostly about short trips, not really the same as like moving here long term.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I guess it does kind of send a signal, right? Like, hey, America's open for business. Come on in. Might make folks more likely to think about us when they're planning their careers, even if it's not an instant visa.
Makes sense. But then there's that thing about the H-2B visa cap. They hit that limit already, right? Didn't sound good for some businesses.
Yeah, that's the one for temporary workers. Seasonal stuff mostly. Means they've given out all those visas for the year already. Big deal for places that rely on that, like think construction, hotels, that kind of work. Shows there's a need for workers for sure.
And if they're hurting for temporary folks, gotta make you wonder how tough it is to get in if you're like a software engineer or something trying to move here for good.
Exactly. Seems like the U.S. is sending kind of mixed messages, Come visit anytime, but getting a work visa, well, it's tricky. And it gets even trickier when we start talking about the really top-tier folks, the ones everyone calls extraordinary in their fields. That's where this EB-1 visa comes in. And boy, has it been in the news lately.
Oh yeah, that's like the golden ticket everyone's after, right? All the articles are saying it's what the best of the best are going for these days.
Yeah, we're talking scientists making huge discoveries, artists changing how we see the world, entrepreneurs shaking up entire industries, people at the very top.
Okay, but extraordinary, how do you even measure that? Seems super subjective, right? Like, who gets to decide?
And you've hit on the big problem with this visa, and it's something that's been a headache for years, both for folks applying and the lawyers helping them. But there's been some good news recently. USCIS, they're the ones handling all this immigration stuff. They've come out and clarified what they're looking for with the EB-1.
So it's clearer now. That's got to be good, right?
Definitely makes things less scary for applicants. At least now you kind of know what you're aiming for. Or less like a guessing game. The experts over at Murthy Law Firm, they seem to think it's a step in the right direction, making the process less, secretive, maybe.
Okay, so that's good if you're even in the running for this EB-1 thing in the first place, but who are these extraordinary people? Give me some examples.
Think like someone who's won a Nobel Prize, right? Or a musician selling out stadiums worldwide. A tech genius with patents coming out their ears, that kind of thing. Right. People who are not just successful, but really changing the game in their own little corner of the world.
Okay, I get it now. But how does all this connect to, regular companies? What do these superstar types have to do with how companies are hiring normal people?
Funny you should ask that. There's a really interesting connection here, and it's all about how tech is changing the immigration game, even for these top-tier folks.
Yeah.
One article we found was talking about this CEO, Ranjit Mudholkar. He's actually using AI to help him decide who to even consider for an EB-1.
Hold on, AI. Like, robots are helping pick who's extraordinary enough to work in America. Now, that's something I got to hear more about.
It's wild, right? So instead of using the old ways, which, let's be honest, can be pretty biased, he's built this whole system where data crunches the numbers and spits out a score. Like, literally, an AI giving you points based on how impressive your career is.
Wow. That's both kind of cool and kind of scary at the same time, Like, is it really more fair if a computer's deciding? And what happens to plain old human judgment in all of this?
Big questions. And it just shows how tricky it is to bring tech into something as nuanced as, like, who gets to live and work in a whole other country. But here's the kicker. It's not just for picking the best of the best anymore. This whole tech thing is changing how people are navigating the system itself, especially in a field we hear about all the time these days. AI, of course.
AI experts, yeah. They're like the rock stars everyone's trying to hire these days. But what's that got to do with visas and stuff?
Well, it's like being brilliant isn't enough anymore. You got to prove it, and loudly. We keep seeing this PR firm, Baden Bauer, they're all over this stuff. Seems they're helping these AI hotshots get their EB-1s, but not in the way you might think.
Really? How so? I thought PR was all about, getting your name in the paper, that sort of thing. What's that got to do with immigration?
It's about building a story, right? Like, you're not just some techie. You're the techie. Everyone knows your name. You're changing the world. Baden-Bauer, they come in and make that happen. Speaking gigs, articles in fancy magazines, the whole 9 yards. They're basically building a case for why this person needs to be in America, but they're doing it through the media, not just forms.
So it's like, instead of impressing a visa officer, you got to impress the whole world first.
Pretty much. And it's catching on not just for AI folks either. Shows how everything's connected these days, right? Immigration law, personal branding, even how you spin a good story, it all matters.
Makes you wonder, though, what about the folks who aren't looking for the spotlight? The ones quietly doing amazing work, but maybe they're not, like giving TED Talks yet. Is there a way for them to bring their skills to the U.S.?
Totally. And this is where it's not about being famous. It's about the work itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, lots of people doing incredibly important stuff without being household names. And for them, there's the NIW, the National Interest Waiver.
Oh, yeah. The NIW seems like a pretty specific visa, not something everyone goes for. How's it different from that EB-1 thing we were talking about?
So the NIW, it's all about how your work could benefit America, the whole country, not just one company or anything. It doesn't matter if you're famous. It's about the potential of what you're doing. Like, imagine you're a researcher working on, I don't know, a cure for cancer or some new clean energy tech. That's the kind of thing they're looking for.
So instead of showing off awards and stuff, you got to show how your work could change the game for the U.S.
Exactly. You're proving that having you here doing your thing is in America's best interest. Could be anything from science to boosting the economy, as long as it matters on a big scale.
Makes sense, especially with everyone fighting over talented people these days. But I bet getting one of these NIWs isn't easy either, huh?
Oh, it's tough, for sure. You got to really make your case, prove your work aligns with what America needs and why you're the one to do it.
Yeah.
But, and this is interesting, it seems like the Biden administration is kind of keen on this route.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got like a PhD in some field that really focused on tech, national security, that kind of stuff.
So strategy matters here too. It's not just about what you want, but how it fits into what the U.S. needs as a whole.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting. Biden and Harris, they keep saying how important it is to get global talent, keep America competitive and all that. And sure, the EB-1 might be sexier, attracting all the big names, but the NIW, that's more their style, quietly supporting the folks doing the hard work, even if they're not on magazine covers yet.
I like that. Gives hope to the folks who might not be, superstar inventors or whatever, but are still doing amazing things in their own right.
Yeah.
But let's be real, even with all these options, EB-1, NIW, it's still a ton of paperwork, waiting, probably headaches along the way, right?
Oh, absolutely. U.S. immigration, it's a marathon, not a sprint, that's for sure. And one thing that jumped out at me while we were researching, people always ask about the processing times, right? Even once they approve your application, it can still be 1 to 3 years before you actually get that green card.
Wow, talk about a waiting game. Really shows you got to be committed to make this move. And with a system that complicated, I'm guessing there's also plenty of room for things to go wrong, even if everyone's trying to do the right thing.
Yep, sadly it happens. We saw a few articles about the Department of Justice having to step in, companies getting in trouble for discrimination, even when it came to immigration stuff. Really shows how important it is for everyone to know what they're doing.
What kind of situations are we talking about?
One that stuck out was this company, they wouldn't accept this guy's work document, said it was expired. Turned out there's this rule that automatically extends it, but they didn't know or didn't bother to check.
So someone could get in trouble for, what, just not understanding the rules?
Exactly. It's a good reminder for everyone. You got to stay informed, because saying, I didn't know doesn't always cut it. Then there's another case. This company, they straight up took back a job offer because they found out the guy wasn't a U.S. citizen.
Seriously? But if he could legally work here...
That's the thing. He could, but they got spooked. Shows how easy it is for bias to creep in, even when companies are trying to do the right thing. It's a mess. So yeah, these cases, they're like a warning for everyone, employers and employees. You got to be careful, be informed, and for goodness sake, be ethical about it all. It's people's lives we're talking about.
It's a good thing to remember for anyone going through this process, for sure. Knowledge is power, as they say. But when you're just starting out, where do you even begin? It can feel like, I don't know, drinking from a fire hose sometimes, right? So much info, and it's always changing.
Yeah, it's a lot. But hey, that's what we're here for, right? To break it down. And honestly, best place to start is always the source itself. USCIS, their website, It's a pain to navigate sometimes, but it's got everything in there. All the different visas, who could apply, the whole 9 yards.
Better than just Googling it, I guess, even if it's less fun than those clickbait articles.
Definitely. But also, don't be afraid to talk to the experts. There are lawyers out there who specialize in this stuff. They live and breathe immigration law.
Right.
They can give you advice that's actually tailored to you, not just some generic thing.
Yeah, personalized help, that's got to be worth a lot in this day and age.
100%. But even before all that, lawyer stuff, you got to do some thinking on your own, too. What are you good at? What do you want to do with your life, Once you've got that figured out, then you can start figuring out which path makes the most sense.
It's all about knowing yourself, then knowing your options.
Right. Bingo. And don't underestimate the power of, talking to people who've actually done it. Find folks in your field, maybe from your home country even, who've gone through this whole immigration thing, gotten their visas, settled in. They're going to have the best tips and tricks, stuff you won't find in any article.
Word of mouth, right? Always the best kind of advice. Speaking of which, we've talked a lot about the strategic side of all this, AI, PR, all that. Do you really need, a whole team of people helping you with this stuff? Sounds expensive.
It can be, for sure. And honestly, if you're going for something like that EB-1, the competition is fierce. Having some help can make a difference. But for most folks, it's really about being proactive, Don't be shy about what you've achieved. Write articles, present at conferences, build a killer LinkedIn profile, whatever makes sense in your field. The point is, make it easy for people to see how awesome you are.
Don't hide your light under a bushel, as my grandma used to say.
Exactly. The more you put yourself out there, the easier it'll be for the right people to find you, whether that's an employer or someone at USCIS.
So be informed, be strategic, and don't be afraid to toot your own horn a little. Sounds like a plan.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, like we keep saying, this is a marathon, folks, not a sprint. It's going to be a long road, probably some bumps along the way. But if you're really committed to building a life here in the U.S., and you've got the skills and the drive, there's a good chance you'll make it happen.
And on that note of optimism, I think we've covered a lot today. Visas, policies, tech, even how to tell your story the right way. It's a lot to digest.
It is, but hey, that's what deep dives are for,
Yeah.
right? Hopefully you, dear listener, are walking away with a better understanding of how this whole thing works.
Thank you for listening to a podcast by greencardselfpetition.com. Visit greencardselfpetition.com for do-it-yourself packets. We aim to provide the collective experience of numerous applicants who have successfully self-petitioned for their green cards without employer sponsorship, in either the EB-1A, Extraordinary Ability, or EB-2, NIW National Interest Waiver categories. Our DIY packets are designed to assist you in your self-petition journey.